NunesMagician. He set up for...
Hello and welcome to another week of Try Nunes is an Absolute Livestream. Here with you as always, Steve Haller. Joining me, Christian DeGuzman and Andy Pregler. How are we doing, guys?
Pretty good. Considering the events of yesterday, who would win in the one true James fight? Would it be James Arthur Boeheim Sr., James Arthur Boeheim Jr., or James Zuba?
I'll take Zuba by a field goal.
Yeah, I think Zuba is low key. He's got some handles. He probably has better handles than body, and I do not mean that as a joke.
Oh god, and we're already in trouble.
Yeah,
all right, team.
Someone's gonna get an email later today.
Yeah, someone's getting an SU80 or a Boeheim. Well, Jim Boeheim doesn't have an email, so we're fine. We don't have to worry about him. But there are other people on Syracuse with emails, and lots of things happened this week. This was one of those weeks where if you were a Syracuse fan, it felt like it was a regular season week because every day you logged in and something was going down. But
not in a positive way.
There was some positive, especially towards the end of the week.
Towards the end,
we kind of turned around.
At the beginning of the week, it was a typical Syracuse week.
Well, that was definitely more Syracuse. So, speaking of that week, what do you say we started off with spring football?
Yeah, so spring football, we have been talking about there's no spring football news. We can start really, we are at the point where I have some friends who are reading Steve's offensive line articles and sending me every Instagram post trying to decode whether it means Damian Alford is actually the starting wide receiver this year. He may very well be, but this is how starved we are for information.
Yeah. Keep in mind, it is April 25th, and we usually get a spring depth chart the first week of March.
Yeah, or a spring guide, or a spring anything. Maybe a spring game. A spring game would be good.
Boston College had a spring game this week. I mean, Boston College can...
The rest of the world had a spring game this week. So, unfortunately, Syracuse did not, whether it's a function of the current situation with the pandemic, whether it's a function of Dino wanted to keep everything under wraps, I don't know, but one way or another, we're probably, at this point, I'm not holding my breath on getting a live look at any of these guys in a game situation until the fall. That said, Andy, if your buddy is reading my offensive line pieces, we're in a weird spot. Because I didn't know any... I just wrote them as complete, straight up, I'm going to spew this stuff out. If people are reading them, more power to them. But,
which universe are we in then that Doctor Strange visits in the multiverse, where people are going to your offensive line articles first for their news?
Hey man, you're the one with the sling ring, so who knows?
Well, the only glimpse we've had inside the sanctum, I just butchered my Marvel credits right there. I was trying to make a sanctum joke right there, but
Sanctorum.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, if you think about it, the ring that's on the top of the dome now could be like the ring that's, for each sanctum in each of the cities that's on the top of their houses. It's the same thing, essentially.
Unfortunately, that ring had opened another portal because early this week, Terrell Richards announced that he was leaving the team. So, I guess it's a weird situation where a guy who, going into last season, we thought was going to be a starter and penned in and just an absolute, beast off the edge. And when he played, he was. But it seems like there was, between either the confusion of whether or not he opted out at the beginning of the season, combined with some other things going on off the field, and then the rest of the young linebackers also showing up may have led to the current situation.
It's tough because, as we've seen across all the other sports, it basically seems like anybody who was not guaranteed significant playing time just kind of bounced. And obviously football is very different than basketball. But again, in Richard's case, Steve, I think that there is something to be read into in the fact that we think that Richards could be having a big role to play in the defense moving forward. It may actually be that a lot of these young players have usurped him, or in the case of, from a coaching staff perspective, they'd much rather go younger this year than go with some veterans in not necessarily key positions, but in positions where they could potentially have a veteran instead of, a more green, younger underclassman.
And
yeah, when you're already looking
at this point, Richards was probably the third string guy at the Sam linebacker behind Steve Linton and behind Stephon Thompson. So at that point, as if you're a senior on scholarship, I guess you're on scholarship. But if you're a senior, especially a senior who's been along with the program for as long as he had, do you really want to be sitting behind two guys on a depth chart? Not necessarily.
right. Yeah, and it's between that, it's not like he could have moved to the Mike or Will and gotten any more run either, because you're looking at two deep there pretty well. If Lee Koba comes back off the indefinite suspension, you're looking at a solidified two deep that there's no easy looks to crack. That those were the guys that all played last year, so he would have had quite the uphill battle.
And if it sounds like we're talking in maybes and projections a lot, it's because like we said, we don't have a depth chart yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the only look that we got inside the program happened this week. It was supposed to be for season ticket holders only. However, the link to the Zoom ended up out in the masses. So I think a lot more than season ticket holders watched, which is fine and the way it should be. There was a conversation with each of the coordinators on Syracuse's staff. The event started talking to offensive coordinator Sterling Gilbert, and then finished with talking to the defensive coordinator, who I literally just blanked on his name. Wow. Tony White. Thank you so much. I was thinking Herm Edwards, and that's not right at all.
I mean, Arizona State, same thing.
Coach for him.
But
coach for him, yes.
Let's also not understate the significance of this, because Dino, in his tenure at Syracuse, has never liked to put his coordinators and his coaching staff out there, whether it be to the media or just the public in general. So like, at least that's something, because like Dino's usually the guy who's going to be speaking for his whole coaching staff. When you had Scott Schaefer, there were still like talks with Tim Lester when he was at offense coordinator, and the media got to talk to him. Dino, we haven't gotten a chance. Anyone has gotten a chance to really speak with the coaching staff. So it's a start, at least.
Yeah, it's definitely a step, and it's even though it was an internal, like, I don't know how to phrase it nicely, but it was definitely like Matt Park moderated it, and it wasn't like, it's not like it was a hard hitting, here's your questions from everybody, but it was still like, it was a good glimpse inside the program. And though we got a lot of coach speak out of Sterling Gilbert, Tony White really opened up on a lot of what the defense is doing and a lot of what he's looking to do. Some of which was coach speak, but more veiled and carefully massaged coach speak.
I was going to say, do you want to start with, I was going to say, we could pick between one of the two coordinators to start with. We're going to start with Tony White because he was definitely the more impressive of the two. Steve, you texted me immediately after he got on, and you said, this guy's the future head coach. And I don't think that is anywhere off base. And I do think that Syracuse is very lucky, and not to get into this can of worms too much, but like the fact that he's a black coordinator means that his progression and his development tends to take a lot longer for black assistant coaches than it does for their white counterparts, which means that he's been a lot more places, he's gotten a lot more experience. But I think we're seeing why he bounces from place to place, because it seems like he continues to impress. He's especially with when he was talking about his Syracuse experience, he took full ownership for the defense being bad last year. And we're all here saying that the defense was the bright spot about last year. And Tony White is saying, no, that was so bad. We need to completely rework our process and ensure that this system can be successful.
Yeah, and he pegged it, like the Duke and the Liberty games, he singled out, saying, these are on me. I didn't let the guys go out and play their game. And to hear that from a DC, that he wants to tailor what he's doing to the point where the players can just go out and play football, that's great to hear. Like, that's a defense somebody wants to play for. That's a system that is going to maximize the talent of the kids out there. And the fact that White, as a first year DC, was like, no, this is not what I wanted. This is not where we need to be. It's huge. And the other big thing was that he literally said, we brought this up to the players, all these changes that you're mentioning, the shifting of the defense to what they needed to improve on. He brought it up to the players and got their buy-in. And to play from that end of things again, you're putting the guys in a situation to succeed. Does this all make sense to you? Okay, we're going to do it. And we may do some other things that don't make sense to you, but this is the base changes we're making. This is where we're taking this. We want to make sure everybody's on board.
Yeah, and I think we could talk about how great Tony White seems to be from a coaching standpoint all we want, but I think the more interesting aspect is, since we didn't get to see a whole lot, we didn't see any spring game film, we haven't seen anything more than very heavily edited highlights. Let's talk about some of the players that were either name dropped or that were explicitly mentioned in the game film. And for those that didn't watch or didn't read the recap that we posted on the site, no judgment here, even though I wrote it, and I'm going to hate you a little bit. The basic format was to ask a bunch of softball questions to the coordinators from Park or from viewers that Park had edited, and then go through a film breakdown. And if you've ever watched the ESPN simulcasts with the football coaches, you understand that those guys love to rewind. Those guys will watch the same clip probably about 10 times in the span that TV would normally show it once. And this was no exception. Both coordinators were really quick on that draw. They showed the highlight probably 10, 15 times, breaking down different aspects of it from different angles. But Steve and Christian, for both of you, the veterans that Tony White highlighted were Josh Black and McKinley Williams along the line. The defensive line depth is nowhere near where I think we all wanted it to be coming out of last season. And these two veterans returning are incredibly important for anchoring this 3-3-5 system. So Christian, we'll kind of start with you. You wrote about it last year a lot. When the defense was good, it was getting pressure with those three along the front. And that was the only reason why the 3-3-5 was so successful very early on.
And the other reason why that 3-3-5 was so successful, and I think the key to it working again next year, is early on in the season, they were actually also stopping the run game. And as Tony White and Steve mentioned, the Duke and the Liberty game is when the run defense started failing. And some of that has to do with the defensive line also, obviously. They're the first guys who have a chance to get their hands on the ball carrier. So those guys on the front are still important because, yes, there's the experience, but they start to improve in that area in the run defense. I think that's the area I'm looking at the most, because as the game goes on, if the run defense is just pounding, if the opposing run game is just pounding away at the opposing defense, then that opens up some of the big secondary holes that we saw towards the latter half of games last season. And that's where the youth of Syracuse kind of got exposed. So the experience is not only important to be physical, like you guys have mentioned, but it's also important to actually set the tempo that Syracuse needs in order to actually develop a rhythm with their defense. And we saw that a couple of times where their defense, the front line, whether it's the front three or the front six, just couldn't pressure either the ball carriers on the run game or pressure the quarterback to a certain extent. And that would set the tempo of how the defense would play throughout that game. So it's very important for those guys to not only be back, but also for them to set tempo and set tone early on.
Yeah, and Steve, for you, one of the two other players that got call-outs from Tony White were linebacker Stephon Thompson and defensive back Jahad Carter. You specifically had mentioned a lot of times while we were just talking about the defense that the linebackers had to be looked at a little bit more critically when it came not just to run defense, but to pass defense as well. But that's because the system asks a lot of these different linebackers. And it seems like, going back to, again, the Tyrell Richards conversation from earlier, Thompson is somebody who really kind of stepped up and showed how a true athlete can really fit into the system and take the system from something that has like clear weaknesses to being something that stifles a lot of offenses.
Yeah, and he'll be, well, I guess technically he'll be a freshman again, due to COVID times. But it'll be interesting to see, like, if they're highlighting him, they're seeing good things. Just like I know during the show I texted you about Jihad Carter. I was like, he's got to be looking good in spring if Tony White's calling him out on this. And that's kind of what we got out of this a bit was these name drops. Like, yes, Bear and Black, they're going to be your highlight reel guys that are coming back. And by highlight reel, I mean for us idiots that stare at trenches. But, to get a call out, Thompson and Carter definitely have done something to impress. So it'll be interesting to see where the growth in the offseason came this year. Because, early in the season, I was not all that high on Carter. Thompson just had a phenomenal year last year, especially for an underclassman. But Carter, I initially wasn't very high on in maybe his first couple of games. Christian, I know you and I have talked about it a couple of times early in the year. But as the season progressed, he kind of settled into that role and showed some promise. So to see that continue will be, for lack of a better description, a good thing.
And it's a good thing also because based on what we've heard from the scrimmages, scrimmage notes, and from Dino Babers himself, one of these safety spots is probably going to Deuce Chestnut. So, like, Carter, cementing his spot is a good thing to, not only show that he's improved and he continues to improve, and he might not be the wet paper Terrell that, some people might have envisioned him to be after, the plethora of secondary tackling problems that showed up last year. But there's at least something to hang your head on, especially when you have someone as promising as Chestnut probably slotting into a starting role next year as well.
Yeah. On the offensive side of the ball, I think that a lot of people have a lot more questions about it. Sterling Gilbert was far more coach speaky than Tony White was, and did an excellent job of avoiding a lot of very specific questions. For example, there is absolutely no update on the quarterback competition, with any sort of indicators just being DeVito knows the offense, and everybody who's coming into campus for the first time needs to learn it. Not even calling out anybody by name. So again, if you're betting or you're making a little tracker at home, DeVito, I guess, is the top by default, but we didn't get any look there. The only two places along the offense that we got some specific kind of hints as to where they're going. The first is Christian's favorite position on the entire offense. It's the tight end position, where Sterling Gilbert specifically said that we're going to see Chris Elmore kind of line back in his natural position of fullback, but they like his athleticism at tight end. They like the options that he kind of gives the offense when he's in that position. But specifically, we should be getting a lot of Luke Benson and Maximilian Mang. How much they get used? Great question. But I think Benson especially is somebody that fans are clamoring for at that tight end pass catching role and need that was not there last year.
And let's reiterate, last year, Baber said a couple of times after games, we need to figure out a way to get the ball to Benson. If that doesn't tell you that the Syracuse offense has a dynamic playmaker in their hands that should get the ball more often, I mean, that should tell you everything. Also, Maximilian Mang is a tall dude as well. So, we've been clamoring for some height in the receiving core, especially after last year. I mean, you might not get him at outside receiver because we're not sure what his 40 time looks like. But he's a tall target that people could easily, whether it's DeVito or Schrader or Morgan or whatever, is throwing the ball. We'll have an easy time throwing over guys in order to get the ball to him. If they decide to use Mang as a pass catcher and not just Elmore every single time as a blocker.
And is he also resides at the Sanctum Sanctorum
Yeah,
with
indeed,
you,
yes.
being another
yes.
Sorcerer Supreme, just on name alone. But you bring up the outside receivers. It looks from, I don't know if he's just a highlight reel guy, but Damian Alford's definitely been getting some more run, vindicating everything that John Casillo has ever believed. And I think, if I remember right, I don't want to. Yeah, no, he did. Gilbert definitely called out Quealy at
Yes.
one point.
Yeah,
so,
he did. Twice in the
it's
highlights.
yeah. I was like, I'm pretty sure I remember that, but he it's good to see those guys get some run. Like Alford came in with a lot of promise and is another one of those big bodies that you were talking about, Christian, where he can probably go up and get something. And he showed in some of these Instagram shots that he's going up and getting some things. So hopefully he kind of comes into his own in the sophomore year and slots into not the slot, but slots in out wide so that we can put Tosh Harris in the slot, because we're not going to stop beating that drum until it happens.
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed when Gilbert they've ran a Taj highlight from early in the season where he grabs a DeVito bomb, and they said they want to keep doing that where he lines up outside and he basically wins the sprint because they think that he can win that matchup more times than not, which is probably accurate. But I think we all kind of realize that he's more than just a fast guy. But if you have somebody else who can do that role, it puts less pressure on Taj to constantly be in that role, and you can then get flexible and create some different mismatches and make the defense think instead of react.
And the problem with that also is that it's one thing for Taj to beat a guy, it's another thing for whoever's throwing the ball to get him said ball. And we've seen plenty of times where the accuracy just isn't there. And more often than not, it's underthrown and it leads to an interception. So Taj can have all the speed that he wants. And like Andy said, more times than not, he's probably going to beat his matchup. But getting him the ball on the outside is another thing. Which is why when we saw it in the end of the NC State game and in the Notre Dame game when he was lining up in the slot and then using his speed in open field on short passes, that's why we were so excited to see Taj in the slot, because we know he's an effective move the chains guy in the slot, which is what you want this offense to do in a Dino Baylor style offense, is to just move the chains constantly, not always look for the home run ball.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess it's one of those where, like, he's a guy who's been in the system for 4 years now. He has had plenty of time. He knows the routes. He knows what the inside guys are doing. Mix it up. Run him out wide. Run him in the slot. Like, he doesn't just have to stand on the touchline. Sorry, sideline. Wrong sport. Back on it.
This Americanized sport.
He doesn't have to literally just be out there, outside the numbers, doing his thing. Bring him inside. Like, throw him all over the field, because no matter where he's going to be a mismatch on, speed, agility, and ball catching against a linebacker. He's going to be a mismatch outside if he can just torch someone and get over the top. And he can jump out of the building. Like, there's not going to be a good matchup on the field against him unless you bring up some of people of the caliber of our 3 DBs that are being drafted. You're not going to match up with him. So, utilize him all over the place. Mix it up. He's not a freshman that just needs to learn the playbook.
Right. And before we get to those 3 DBs who are about to get drafted, we cannot have a football conversation without talking the offensive line. If you did not, on the site this week, read Steve's preview about the offensive line, you definitely should. Sterling Gilbert talked about the offensive line in depth to open up the huddle, the weekend, or the stream that they called a huddle. Basically, there was no specifics given out other than Chris Bleach is an SEC lineman who's coming into the ACC, and they feel good about that. There was lots of talk of cross-training. There was lots of talk of a snapping school for lots of different players to get potential reps under center. Steve, your article did a really good job of kind of breaking down why it's great to cross-train, why it's great to have the depth, but we already have a pretty good idea of 4 of the 5 guys along the offensive line if everybody stays healthy. If health is not there, that's an entirely different story. But overall, I think a lot of people just want to know the basic question. Is the offensive line better this year than it's been the last 3 years at this point?
All right, big giant asterisk here. If they come into camp with remotely the 4 penned-in names that we know, well, technically probably close to 5. That right tackle spot is kind of a question mark, but yes, that it is a definitive yes if everyone makes it to camp. In the past, that has been an issue, and that's one thing I brought up in the article was 2018 returned as many guys. I think it returned 4 guys out of the 5, and then also brought in Coda Martin, who was a top level transfer starter in the SEC. You do that, and it definitely significantly helps your chances. The 2016 team that Dino Babers inherited was a very similar situation to what we saw in 20, where 3 of your guys went down as you're going into camp. So you can see the differences in, and I guarantee nobody gave like any time to the offensive line in 2016, but they looked like a group that lost 3 of their starters going into camp, much like last year did. So I think if we can stay healthy, we're running 20 deep currently on the active roster. There are 20 offensive linemen. That's mildly insane. That's the most we carried since 2018, where we carried 17 guys. So we're we're cross training, we're working, and we're bringing in bodies, if nothing else. So with 5 guys coming in, that should offset any of the attrition, any of the issues, any of the injuries that need to be mitigated. I would wholeheartedly, whatever you want, say the offensive line will be improved this year. To what degree has yet to be seen, but yes, if you want the Cliff Notes, and somehow that was the Cliff Notes on it, yes.
Yeah, I think, listen, go read it. It's really good, really well detailed, and kind of explains how we got here, which is ultimately what everybody wants to know. But let's talk about those 3 defensive backs who are probably going to get drafted. This is really exciting time for Syracuse football because it's been a while since Syracuse has had 3 legitimate guaranteed guys going in a single draft. Typically, there's one person that we're pretty confident is going to get drafted, and then a whole bunch of, I don't know, maybe they get thrown in the last day. This year is different. We've got Ife Melifonwu, Andre Sisco, Trill Williams. They all should get drafted at some point during the draft. All 3 defensive backs. Tony White talked a lot about DBU and the ability to recruit with that weapon, that you can literally just point, like, I guarantee you he's texting every single defensive back recruit that Syracuse is targeting from now until 2030, going, hey, look at this. We've got 3 guys that are going, 3 guys going this weekend. Christian, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to kind of, I know we're all NFL fans here. I don't know if you've really gotten a chance to kind of break down where everybody's kind of going, but it seems like in general, nobody's going to go day 1. Everybody's going to kind of go somewhere in that day 2 or 3 mold of they could be as high as a 2nd, they could be as low as a 6th.
Well, I think there's enough praise out there for Sisco and Melifonwu that I don't think it's out of the question that's a team would go pick one of them in the first round. It would be a reach, in my opinion, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, from what I've seen and from what I can probably guess, like two or the 2nd or 3rd round is probably where Sisco and Melifonwu are going to go picked. I don't think either of them falls out of the 4th round. If they fall further than the 4th round, that's something's drastically wrong. And then Trill will probably go day 3, but again, his intangibles, or should I say tangibles, based on his athleticism and his just basic freakish body, he'll get picked just because of that. But because of the length of Melifonwu and the consistency of Melifonwu and the ball hawkish nature of Sisco, I'm not going to be surprised if someone is willing to take a flyer on one of those guys in the 1st round. It's more likely that they'll go round 2 or 3, but I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, Steve, we kind of talked about this a lot in the pre-Christian days of the live cast, back when our teams were both competing in the NFL playoffs. Oh man, that feels like forever ago. The Cisco is your boomer bust type defensive back. Iffy is your more standard, like you're just gonna line him up against the number 2 option, and you're just gonna let him fight that battle for the entire game. And Trill depends on the creativity of the defensive coordinator. Like we've all seen some, especially. I hate that I'm about to do this as a Buffalo Bills fan with a defensive coordinator that it actually tries to do some interesting stuff. Like there is some potential that these players, like if they end up in the right system in the right spot, could be like really hang on with an NFL team for a while and become impact players.
Yeah, they. I don't know.
All three of these. This is Steve trying to hold back his smug face because of Buffalo with their nickel quarterbacks. I'm not sure.
Fits right.
I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen the Top Gear from the BBC.
Yeah.
That's Jeremy.
Yep.
That's Jeremy Clarkson trying to hold back his smug face.
It's also part of me where the Bills are actually doing something, and I don't want to jinx it. But in all honesty, you look at it.
But that's the Andy in you, because that's the Arsenal side of you as well.
Yeah, there you go.
We will not say that name on this podcast. Well, this live cast. We will keep this live cast clean.
God. But yeah, I mean, any of these 3 guys would fit into, like you said, a creative system. Trill needs to find the right home, and I think he will. I'm almost like, if he doesn't go, by round 6, by round 5, do you almost want him to go undrafted and then have somebody pick him up because they want him and that he can impress in camp, instead of being tied to, a fit that may not be perfect for him? So that's always the question of late rounds. Similar to Tiana, who apparently Taurasi called her a little baller today. So that came out, that worked out in the grand scheme of things. But finding the right home is going to be the thing for Trill. The other 2 guys, they fit into a system in a way you need them to. Trill is so diverse in what he can do. The question is what they're going to find for him to do at that level.
Yeah.
So he really does need to find the right fit. And I mean, I think he will. Like, no matter what, I think he'll find his way onto a roster next year, just from sheer ability and athleticism. So it's crazy to think that Syracuse is looking at 3 guys taken at effectively the same position or the same position grouping. You don't see that anywhere outside of, the Bamas or the Ohio States. So to see that happen for us, it'll be nice to see.
And the thing with Trill is, I mean, we mentioned it with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, when they're running their nickelback packages, it's pretty effective. And Trill has been one of the best nickelbacks and slot cornerbacks in college football. And it's not out of the realm possibility that translates very, very well to a system that needs a nickelback or a slot cornerback. So, teams that need that'll be the perfect fit for Trill.
Yeah, I would love to see him head down the throughway. I'd be more than happy to see him on the Bills roster. But yeah, how
quickly do you buy that jersey if that happens?
Oh, that's snap! As soon as that happens,
Listen, I have this.
With the new jersey rules, can he wear 6 now?
Yes, he can.
Yeah. Yep.
You're talking to somebody who literally in the shelf next to him has a Shamarko Thomas Pittsburgh Steelers jersey. So this group here is not your normal group of football fans. We are Syracuse football fans, which means that we stand hard for anybody who gets drafted. And again, to kind of wrap this up, I think that when you're talking about Trill and finding the right fit, the current best Syracuse football player in the NFL is a great example of this, of Chandler Jones, who started his career in New England and had a lot of really good flashes. But it wasn't until he got to Arizona when they were willing to fully move him off of the line and turn him into that weird freak edge rusher that can be pretty much anywhere as long as he's on the edge. Doesn't have to be on the line. He can be in the linebacker position, and he literally wins the NFL Defensive Player of the Year award. That's Trill to me feels very much in that same vein of his first 4 years, that first contract, we'll definitely see some flashes. Whether or not he needs to go somewhere else to have the full potential unlocked remains to be seen, and along with these other guys that might also get potentially drafted.
Are you hearing this, Leslie Frazier?
Yeah. Speaking of Tiana Mahakadia, let's transition to basketball and start with the women's basketball team. So Tiana, we talked about her, and she's signed with Phoenix. It seems like things are going very well for her there. The women's basketball team had some good news and some not so good news this week.
We don't have a women's basketball team until everybody shows up in August. So currently, the problem is with the news of Camila Cardoso leaving, I don't know if we have an active roster.
Do we? Are we going to start selling milk cartons now with his basketball team? If not, if so, call 315-444-4444.
So we're just spamming William Matar's number.
Yeah. Oh right, that is his number. God, it's been so long since I've seen Q's commercials that it's like I've forgotten all of the stereotypical Q's ads.
Well, so to pull up Sarah's amazing reporting, Carmilla is the 12th Syracuse player to enter the transfer portal this year.
And stop. That's all you need to say.
So for those counting, women's basketball can carry 15 scholarships. That means there's 3 active players on the roster.
Yes,
right now.
Most of the players who are going to be coming in are transfers, and we are looking at a big freshman class coming in, also bolstered by Laura Salamarn, who was supposed to be part of the 2020 class, but couldn't get to the United States due to COVID-19 restrictions in her native country of Spain. So she reclassified and will be coming in as a freshman this season. So aside from the fact that this means that doing a women's basketball preview is like Sarah has the literal hardest job of any of the Nunes writers because she has to make something up out of absolutely nothing. You did not have a great week. And I think that there's a lot of conversations happening about what's going on. He did a let's not freak out press conference, which worked until the Camilla news broke. And I think we're just going to be I think Q is just going to have to deal with this all season long because unless the team comes out gangbusters, they're going to be a middling ACC program, which is what they've been a lot of years under Q, with a potentially high ceiling if these freshmen are really good. But the entire season is going to be dictated around, but what happens if you had Camilla?
Now, the real kick in the balls is going to be if Camilla transfers to an ACC school, like 5 other people have done from this women's basketball program.
Yeah.
Or she could just transfer to UConn, and then all of a sudden, it's Beckers and Cardoso's waltzing to an NCAA title.
They would walk it.
But that's like also not out of the realm of possibility because we spent a lot of this time, like everybody on ESPN when the nationally televised games kick through at the end of the year, we're like, this is the potential National Player of the Year candidate, and it feels like a very Gino Auriemma move to go like, I got Brianna Stewart out of Syracuse. This shouldn't be that hard.
There you go.
So, again, Sarah, if you're watching, listening, good luck with the previews. I do not want to have your job. That's not going to be fun.
So we'll keep you updated on that, but it's an ever evolving situation of what
media day next year is going to be interesting.
Yeah,
it will.
And not just because of the women, but the men. They announced that they're going to be playing Villanova at Madison Square Garden. Every fan of the old Big East rejoices, is happy. Everyone's hoping that Cole Swinder ends up dropping like 15 points, even though we don't know if he's even going to be a starter or not. So let's just deal with that for an entire 6 months before this game gets played. I'm more interested in Christian talking to you about something that John Cassillo brought up in Slack and on Twitter. This schedule has very quietly become incredibly difficult for a team that is dealing with a lot of transfer issues on its own and is relying on a 2-guard situation that had very mixed results this past season and a transfer coming in playing a 4 who has not played basketball in over a year.
Yeah, so one, we get Duke twice, which is always tough, especially since we're not in the same division as them. I mean, ACC divisions is another topic for another day, but like that's already tough from the ACC side. But when you get to neutral side, Villanova is always going to be tough. But what Syracuse fans might have forgotten is that Syracuse is in the battle for Atlantis in 2021. Now, the last time Syracuse was in the battle for Atlantis, that went well. And thank God that went well, because that was in 2016, and, it was the 2015-2016 season, and, good things happened that season, Final Four and everything, despite, somehow sneaking with a 10 seed. The battle for Atlantis, let's run through the teams, because Syracuse will face at least 3 of these teams. In alphabetical order. Arizona, well, not in alphabetical order. I'm going to go off the order that John wrote on the site. Arizona State, Auburn, Loyola Chicago, no Porter Moser, but still Loyola Chicago, Michigan State, UConn, VCU, and then the defending national champions, Baylor. Syracuse will face one of those 3 teams.
Not great.
It's a tough battle for Atlantis. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that Syracuse loses 3 games in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even the Fighting Sister Jeans are like a team you don't want to face.
Honestly, like, your best bet there is to play VCU, hope the team gets hot, and then you take on somebody else. And that, relying on playing VCU to get hot seems like a really bad idea. like this whole thing is just I'm with you, Christian. I think that they could go 0-3 in the Battle of Atlantis, and then that's again before we play Villanova. We don't know, have we confirmed if there's a Georgetown game this year or not? That seems to still be up in the air.
I'm pretty sure there is. John put it on his schedule, so I don't think it's wrong. But yeah, I would assume there is a Georgetown game. But let's flash back to the 2019 season that ended badly. Remember, like that non-conference schedule started abysmally, especially as after Syracuse started went 0-2 in the NIT tip-off, and that didn't go well.
Yeah, I was at both of those games, and it was not fun. I can confirm it was very much not fun.
I was not there. I can also confirm it wasn't fun.
I'm pretty sure I've told this story before, but I was in 2018. I did the double duty of going to the Syracuse UConn game in MSG, and then the following day going to Syracuse Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium.
Yes.
And that wasn't fun either.
Yeah, that was tough. Again, I don't love the way that this basketball we just don't know so much about it. And I think that this is worth exploring. Again, COVID has completely changed whether this can happen or not. I know that Syracuse did the Italy trip, like the Jim Boeheim farewell trip that they did. I don't know if the NCAA has rules allowing for another overseas something or another, but this would be a great year to swing through Canada and play some teams early, because I do not think that the roster as currently constructed is set up to do well in a Battle for Atlantis tournament right off the bat of the season. Like, if you had Kadari Richmond returning, Quincy Guerrier was a guaranteed returner. Like, I think that this team suddenly becomes much different, and you're able to maybe lean on some veterans in some early tough games. If, say, listen, we're all excited for Benny Williams, still a freshman. We have seen very talented freshmen at Syracuse start off very poorly in their first tests of actual big boy NCAA men's basketball. It's not out of the realm of possibility that it takes a bit for him to find his stride instead of being the savior that I think everybody thinks he might be.
So Siena is not the big boy basketball test that people are thinking of. So very different.
Very, very different. Those are the big sports right now. And if you thought that we're even close to being done, ha ha ha, there's a lot that happened this week in other Syracuse sports. So let's start with the one that Steve and I know the least about, lacrosse. Let's go with the bad news first before we get to the good news. Chase Scanlon, number 22 at Syracuse, is no longer the number 22 at Syracuse.
And according to Anish Shroff, well, I'm going to say according to Anish Shroff a lot, first of all, today. So first of all, let's say thank you, Anish, for supplying a ton of this information, as he did, like sprinkling tidbits out through the ESPN broadcast of the Syracuse Virginia game, which we'll get to later. But according to Anish Shroff, there is talk in the program that he just might not play for Syracuse again.
Yeah.
That's a bad look for a 22.
First, bad luck for a 22. And if this weekend's result didn't happen, bad luck for a team that has been struggling to find some form, just in general. Because Scanlan, for all the grief I gave him at the beginning of the season, was still Syracuse's leading goal scorer coming into this weekend. So, yes, he's had his struggles this year, but you don't replace 20-plus goals overnight.
No.
And you don't replace a 22 overnight, whether he's lived up to expectations or not. So, and as a starter who is part of that group that makes all three of them click so well, like, it's really, really tough to replace him. And when we all heard this news coming over through the week, that was like almost final nail in the coffin scenario for Syracuse for this season, at least.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Jacob Falp woke up.
And then Jacob Falp proved that ACC assistant who thought Falp was going early was wrong.
He just happens to apparently own Virginia's face-off guy.
Let's remind everyone that coming in today, I could be off by 1 or 2, but I'm pretty sure coming into this weekend, Petey LaSalle was ranked 5th in the NCAA in face-off percentage at about 70%.
That is good.
And when you take away that FOP, if you take away the first Syracuse Virginia game, FOP and ACC play was 21% from the face-off X. And against Virginia, he lost 3.
I'll take it.
I don't understand how this face-off magic is literally magic, and it just kind of shows up week to week.
So it's clearly not a timing issue. Does FOP just have LaSala's number? Because LaSala is a beast in literally every other matchup.
Right.
And FOP has
not a beast.
And FOP turned into Chris Daddio in every other ACC matchup. And,
God.
And all of a sudden, he goes 24 of 27 from the dot.
Right.
Did
he
of all, 24 of 27 doesn't happen in regular lacrosse.
No.
Petey LaSala was 1 for 16.
I still am just blown away by the fact that when this news broke, we all kind of went, all right, that's it, because lacrosse needs to win 2 of their last 3 games in order to make the NCAA tournament.
One of their last 2, because who knows if we're getting a third.
Oh, that's very fair. And so everybody just kind of figured, all right, the UVA game, that just might be the nail in the coffin. This could be it. And as the game's going on, I see you tweeting, I'm seeing John tweeting, and then I see Carolyn. Hi, Carolyn. Tweeting about this game, just going oh God, this is going to be one of those dumb Virginia games, isn't it? And I was like, oh, Syracuse is going to do that dumb Syracuse thing now, huh?
This is great, because Carolyn did a piece. I'm not sure if it was on Friday or sometime during the week, but Carolyn did a piece on Streaking the Lawn on Petey LaSala, and at least mentioned it on the broadcast as well.
I love Anish. Yeah. I love him. So to put a bow on the men's lacrosse conversation, 24 for 27 is the 6th most face-off wins in a single game in SU history. What we saw was historic. It was a historic effort that kept Syracuse's season alive. They're going to need 2 more, at least 1 more of them.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that LaSala piece was a long form too.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
It's a good piece also.
I gotta go back. I just bookmarked it to go back and read
Yeah.
it. So
Somewhere
And then he
out
went
there,
1 for
this is the
16 from the
validation that
X.
Carolyn needed.
And then he went 1 for 16 from the X.
well, as we said,
Syracuse outshot Virginia 54-30.
Yeah, and we still somehow only won by 2.
A late game was awful for Syracuse because I think they forgot how to play with the lead. Because, yeah,
well, they haven't had one for a while.
yeah, and then the defense started to fail a bit because but I do want to mention this because I want to give another shout out to our sister blog at SB Nation, College Cross, because whoever was running their Twitter account put out a great point as to even when Virginia got the ball, like 30 shots is still not a lot. When Virginia got the ball, most of their offense is based on one-on-one matchups and dodging individually. And what have we said this entire year about Syracuse's defense? They're great on ball. They're awful off ball. And so when your offense is mainly based around on ball dodging and individual matchup wins, like Virginia's offense is, and as College Cross pointed out, that plays right into Syracuse's hands because they have great on ball defenders. And so this might just be a scenario where Syracuse just matches up against Virginia incredibly well. And then the other ACC teams who don't have the same on-ball defenders but have much better communication can maybe struggle with a Virginia who can win individual matchups more easily.
Well,
it comes in handy to at least know we have them in our pocket if we run up against them in the ACC tournament or no ACC tournament.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Virginia, and Anish pointed this out on the broadcast, the ACC allows you to schedule 15 games or 14 games and a scrimmage. Virginia has played already 14 games and has already played a scrimmage. So that means they can no longer schedule any games until the NCAA tournament, which is 3 weeks away. So Virginia won't play a game for the next 3 weeks.
Seems odd, but
yeah.
Meanwhile,
Syracuse is playing Notre Dame next week and trying to schedule another game in place of the Utah game that got canceled.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah, just drive down the thruway, go grab Hobart and throw them on the field and say, listen, we're going to run at you.
What's a Syracuse lacrosse season without the Cross-Simmons Trophy?
That's true. A weird one. On the women's side, they play 2 games because that's been a thing that's been happening all season, and I continue to forget about it. They lost by a single goal to Boston College on Thursday, which was kind of a bummer, and the second loss for the women of the season. So then they promptly came out on Saturday and said, "Nah, we're just gonna take this," and they won 16-7. So I think they found what they were missing in the first game, and just promptly reminded BC of what's going on. That victory solidified them as the number 2 seed in the ACC tournament. Number 1 seed is the aforementioned on this show many, many, many times, the UNC Tar Heels. So it looks like if all goes well, we're going to get...
It was the UNC Road Graders this year.
Yeah, we're going to get a UNC-Syracuse matchup if we go chalk. So go chalk and hope that they figure it out for the second time around.
Yeah.
I was going to try and segue that into Howard Chuck, but it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Let's go back to BC.
Let's touch on the BC games for a second first before we get into the other news regarding 2 of Syracuse's players this past week. The BC games could really be just boiled down to 2 stats. Ace of Goldstock saves. Goldstock in the win made 9 saves, allowed 7 goals. In the loss, made 4 saves and allowed 14 goals. So I think at this point, Syracuse's games pretty much ride and die based on Goldstock's performances.
Yeah, how Asa Goldstock goes, so go the Orange.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of. I will freely admit I didn't watch I didn't watch either game because I was doing other things. I didn't just looking at these real quick. In the second game, like Syracuse held Charlotte North to 0 goals, which is very important. Again, Charlotte North probably will win the Tuarton Award for women's lacrosse this year. And in the first game, North had 5 goals, so like that helps a lot. When you're holding Charlotte North to 0 goals, you're doing something right.
Right.
Yeah. In general, I feel like, and Steve, you kind of alluded to it. This has been a season where like a lot of things have gone right for women's lacrosse. So naturally, as we go to the end of the season here, things are gonna get weird.
Yeah. Yep. So we, as always, got the good news and the bad news. So I'll go with the good news. For next year, it is official that Emily Howardchuk is coming back. So that makes next year's offense somewhere stratospheric, possibly. Like you, yeah. So that'll be a good thing, and the rest of the news not as great. So
because in that first BC game, Megan Carney exited very early. Well, not very early, but still 7.5 minutes into the second half. Megan Carney went down with a non-contact injury. Appeared to be favoring her knee. 9 times out of 10, that's an ACL. And Megan Carney.
I mean, there's still an MCL or PCL or an LCL in there, so.
Yeah, I mean, but 9 times out of 10, it's an ACL.
Yeah, fair.
And Megan Carney is again Syracuse's leading goal scorer. So like, that doesn't help matters either.
Recurring themes here.
Very, very much so. Recurring themes.
So many recurring themes with all of the CLs. Gird your knee ligaments, Syracuse lacrosse players. It seems like it's something that is potentially at risk.
So I don't know. How do you have both teams lose their leading goal scorer and somehow offensively end up looking better than they did in their prior game?
Syracuse.
Fair.
it's
totally understandable.
Yeah, I don't have it.
And this is the second time that the women have lost their leading goal scorer
and come out looking
this season.
And come out looking like it does not matter. I mean,
technically, one was in the preseason, right?
Syracuse.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
So we've got some time here. We started a little bit late, so we'll get this is an opportunity to talk about some of the other Olympic sports that had some also really interesting weeks. I am going to start off with softball because one, they have the best uniforms, and I wish I could get the both of their uniforms, the orange one and the script Syracuse one. Like,
this is your weekly reminder that Syracuse doesn't have a baseball team.
Yep, and their uniforms would look gorgeous. Women's softball started the season really strong, and then they split a series with Boston College, and then they got swept by Florida State to create a 6-game losing streak, which is just not fun. So they come out, and again, they were also in Charlottesville, and they took 3 of 4 from Virginia with their most recent game, including a complete game by Alexa Romero, who is, I think, as Christian, as you kind of pointed out, is quickly becoming probably one of the best softball players at Syracuse, period, like, of all time. It's her second complete game of the weekend, and she allowed just a single hit. So while you might have heard the news about the Baylor player who struck out all batters that she faced, Alexa Romero is a very, very, very good version of that as well, and happens to be on Syracuse. So just softball games are sometimes on ESPN, on the ESPN3 or on ACC Network. Worth a watch when you can, because it seems like they're coming around in good form at the right time.
This is the first time in a while that Syracuse softball is over 500. And so, like, that's a good turning point for the program.
Yeah, it is. They had their moment, like when a lot of the other Olympic sports were all kind of peaking at the same time. Softball getting on in that action. They've had a coaching change since then. There's been a little bit of a program flip, but it seems like things are going in the right direction. Again, wish there was a baseball team because I would follow the crap out of that. But a sport that we do follow the crap out of is soccer. And Steve, we had Syracuse on Syracuse action this weekend.
yeah, you have to report, you know, that I don't even know how to phrase it. Alex Bono stonewalled the hell out of Ryan Raposo to get save of the game honors for Toronto FC this weekend. Would have been Raposo's first goal for the Vancouver Whitecaps. I believe it's his 17th appearance. Bono looks to be, I don't know if what the situation with him and Quentin Westberg is, but it looks like at present he is back on top and is their starting keeper. He did start the 2 CCL games, started last week in MLS and started this week in MLS. So even though like Westberg was late coming back to camp, who was the starter last year, it looks like Bono may have surpassed him and has the nod at this point. At least keep riding the hand. So good to see Alex in net for Toronto. Bad to see him stonewalling his well, I guess they weren't teammates, but
a long time between their playing careers at Syracuse.
Yeah, fellow Orange. I mean, long time. It was like 4 years.
I didn't realize that goal was in the 3rd minute of stoppage time in a tie game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that would have been the game-winning goal for Vancouver if Raposo scored.
Yep. That would have gotten Ryan a contract extension. Instead, he gets stonewalled by a fellow Syracuse alum
who is also fighting to get, some after a little bit of period of time where he was not the guy. It seems like he's fought his way back into being potentially the guy. So good,
there was the time where he was the guy, then he didn't become the guy, but now he's trying to become the guy again.
Yep. And as Coach Max says, like, how are you not sure you're supposed to react to that highlight? I don't know how I'm supposed to react to that highlight. So we're gonna talk about it.
Yep. So along those lines, anyone who's keeping tabs on things, there are 6 guys in the league. The 2 aforementioned players, as well as Tajon Buchanan in New England, and then the 2 Atlanta United guys in Mo Adams and Miles Robinson, and Kamal Miller now playing at Club de Football Montreal Impact.
Yes.
Because I'm just going to keep throwing the Impact in there.
It is.
Also, on the women's side, we found out that, Georgia Allen is playing in the Premier League. And who else? Courtney Brosnan got the start for the Lady Irons.
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah.
So
I think she's
John Gasillo.
Yeah, I think she's been there for a while. And Brosnan's also been Ireland's #1 goalkeeper for their national team.
Yep.
So, I mean, Brosnan was awesome when she was at Cuse, and it's great to see her continue that at the next level.
So, now that they're picking up, or I guess we know to cover them or follow them, as well as we have NWSL picking up, and Aaron Simon is going to be playing in the league. We'll be keeping more tabs on them in the pros too. So I'll keep adding them to my soccer in the pros updates.
It's really great that we're seeing this. Like, I think we went through a dark period with Syracuse sports where there weren't very many Olympic sport success or Olympic sport alumni in their pros because their pro leagues also just didn't exist. The team, say what you want about the ACC move, the results across the program have been very good for a lot of sports, and not only just raising their profile as a team, but also getting alumni into positions of long-term athletic success.
Yeah.
And then they all realized how good UNC was at Olympic sports.
Every time. UNC.
Yeah, UNC's got a little bit of a juggernaut down there. I don't like it.
In pretty much almost every sport.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah, I'm getting real sick of seeing that baby blue. Even if it is arguably it's the only thing that can rival orange in terms of just great single color branding across sports.
Yeah, you see that and you know who you're looking at.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I know that we're looking at another full week and another great show. Thank you to everybody who stuck around and watched us live. To everybody who's watching us tomorrow after this goes live up on the site, thanks again. Hope that this is a great way to start off your week. We will be back here again next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern because Steve already has the live countdown timer going because he is an excellent producer and knows exactly what to do. So that's what I have at. Christian, as our resident younger person, can you say all the things that need to be said so that way we can continue to get followers?
Yeah, head to it. If you are watching on the site the day after, make sure you head to our YouTube page, NunesMagician, and you subscribe, like the video as well. And once you subscribe, ring the notification bell so that you get notified whenever we go live for these live casts. So that you can join us.
They're fun.
That works.
Yeah. Steve?
I think that covered it.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that everything? Because otherwise I'm just going to say go orange and drink my beer.
Oh, I do want to plug, for anyone in the Syracuse area, a couple of local bands have started a podcast called Audio Capsule. So take a look at that. It's a recap of some local talent. I know they're good friends of the pod, so it's good to get some Syracuse cross promotion in. So check it out anywhere podcasts are found. And I guess other than that, go Orange.
Go orange.
Go Orange.